feel like you have this mountain to climb and you think you need 1 million followers, you really don't. You need 100 really invested fans or clients. You could have 30 or 40 clients, but maybe you have 60 other people where they tune into your free content and they comment on stuff and they support stuff or they review your podcast. That's something I think people undervalue tremendously. You can build those tribes and true fans. You're really going to put yourself in a better place, both in person and online, because you'd be shocked at what you can build by having 100 people who really respect, appreciate, and jive with your work. Welcome to sammillerscience, where you're joining me nearly 2 decades into my personal journey to bridge the gap between macros, metabolism, muscle, and medicine. If you're joining me, thanks for trusting me to elevate your health and realize your true potential. Each week and inside every episode, I'll be sharing methods and models from my coaching journey and my personal experience, as well as the science that you need to achieve whatever specific goals you're working on in your life. Let's jump into today's show. This next episode is a special one. Imagine you have the opportunity to pull me aside at a live event and ask pertinent industry-related questions. And that's exactly what Andrew did. So I've had the opportunity to speak at the Silverback Summit for one of my good friends over the past few years now, but this was our first time recording a live interview at the site of the summit. Now, this meant that we were able to dive into some really important topics that were coming up at the live event, but also things that have probably been on your mind if you're a health and fitness professional as well. So whether you're just starting out or you're someone who's been in the industry for a while, I think you'll really benefit from this. Andrew has a wealth of experience as a podcast host. He's actually one of the original co-hosts of Mark Bell's Power Project. So we've had the opportunity to work together before on more nutrition topics, but this is a really great episode if you're looking to dive into what's going on in the industry and getting some tips directly from me on my advice for you, whether you're just starting out or scaling a business inside this industry. Some things that coaches should consider, both related to their education, certifications, and more. So without further ado, let's jump into this featured replay. Yeah. So one of the biggest problems first with that whole term in the industry in general is a lot of people will do like one bodybuilding competition and they think it makes them a coach, or just because they're the most jacked person at their gym. Or now there's a lot to be said for leading by example. I think if you're in shape and you walk the walk of what it is that you're going to be telling your clients to do, it's far less hypocritical than someone who's not active and in shape. So I appreciate that people are lifting and they look good or they compete, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're an expert or really someone who can shepherd someone else's transformation or their journey, because you're kind of being a steward of that whole process of like fitness, nutrition, lifestyle, everything. So one of the biggest things, one, is just coaches kind of coming into the industry and thinking that you sort of just announce or dub yourself that you are like ready to lead people. I think there's a lot to be said about getting education, mentorship, having a coach yourself. One of the best ways to be a good coach and help people with their nutrition and training is to have been coached by someone who has the experience, who has the decades under their belt. That's a really big thing that I think is missing right now. In terms of things I think are missed on the nutrition side, it's just kind of being able to go beyond macros and calories, or being able to go beyond the meal plan, seeing past the diets with names, and just the trends that are out there, and realizing, having that deeper understanding of nutrition, of what really is driving people's physique goals, but also how they feel, how they perform. It's so much more than just only the kind of calculator macro Tetris approach that I think people take. That's not to say that you can't control your portions or do what's necessary in that regard. But I think people hyper-focus on that sometimes, and they're missing the forest for the trees and certain elements of like what actually makes something nutritious, or let's learn about nutrition. I think a lot of coaches understand what a diet is. I don't necessarily know that they're really experts in nutrition. Mm-hmm. If you're newer and you don't have a huge following, don't underestimate how having a small network of people who like you, can be really helpful. And if you are online, I try to get people to move away from kind of this over attachment to the algorithm and think about building, if you can just have 100 true fans, kind of a Seth Godin concept. If you can build those tribes and true fans, you're really going to put yourself in a better place, both in person and online, because you'd be shocked at what you can build by having 100 people who really respect, appreciate, and jive with your work. So if you feel like you have this mountain to climb and you think you need 1 million followers, you really don't. You need 100 really invested fans or clients. And not all of them even you could have 30 or 40 clients, but maybe you have 60 other people where they tune into your free content and they comment on stuff and they support stuff or they review your podcast. That's something I think people undervalue tremendously, because those first 100 people, and then they're going to have friends, they're going to have siblings, they're going to have coworkers and colleagues that then they can, when you become the obvious choice to those people, then they tell their friends. But so many people are worried about impressing 1 million people that they never get the first 100 because they're not willing to go one person at a time and actually connect with them, provide value. And that is something that really can help to inspire like a movement for your business or your coaching. Or even if you're just trying to, be a content creator, I think there's still something to be said about engaging with that first core group.
Yep.
Because
Absolutely.
those are kind of your loyal fans that help to move the needle, really. When you're brand new, I think you have to knock on multiple doors at the same time. So you need to be leading by example with your own fitness or nutrition. You need to be networking. You need to be creating content. And then you're also coaching people to demonstrate that you're good at what you do, that you can keep because what's going to happen is when you market a coaching service, you then have to be able to fulfill the promise of whatever, like your offer is basically a prepackaged promise to solve someone's problem. So if you can develop the reputation of solving that problem, you create content about how you solve that problem and why you're able to solve that problem, why you're interested in that problem, what is your story. And then you can also speak to it effectively, and people see you in your own journey showing up, doing the work. I think it's a snowball effect of all of those things together. You have to be doing multiple, but if you're only doing one of those things, like for example, the person training who did the bodybuilding show, but they're not invested in these other aspects of coaching, that's going to be a problem. The content creator who maybe doesn't have the social proof of creating, maybe they make great content, but no one believes that they can actually solve the problem that they're struggling with. Or maybe you lead by example and you create content, but you're not relatable because people look at you and you have an 8-pack, but they don't see any educational content from you. So they don't understand how to get there. It feels unrealistic to them. But when I think you pursue free education and paid education, as well as mentorship, apprenticeship, you create content, you lead by example, and then you also work to create that social proof, build your reputation through helping people slowly but surely, those start to stack wins for you, where then you become a more credible source. I think that's kind of the ingredient. That's the recipe for credibility. And as a coach, that's really how you're going to grow. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do that, right? Those are kind of 5 main categories, and everybody has their own preference and style. But that's what I try to get people to focus on. And if you're doing those 5 things, you can build that tribe of 100 people a bit faster. Again, the problem is with social media, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, everyone wants to have 1 million people. And because of that, they want to go one to many, but now your followers don't feel very important. You're not actually, your advantage right now is what you perceive to be your disadvantage. Is like, because you don't have a ton of followers engagement, well, that means you can spend more time with each follower. Whereas someone who has a massive account, they're not responding to all their comments. They're not responding to their DMs, but you can. And so that disadvantage is actually your advantage to build trust with those people. They like you and they share your stuff. It's a different way to grow. But if you're not the most prolific person in the world, or you find that you're still new in that content game, and I'm sure you've seen this with podcasts too. It's like, that's how you kind of build a bit of a loyal following, doing that, where people actually care. And they're not just like, you're not just some random person on a list of shows that they subscribe to or people they follow. That's kind of where it starts. It's okay that there's discrepancy between price to value at the beginning, because you're trying to prove yourself, right?
Yeah.
So you may need to have another job in the short term while you get this off the ground with your first 2 to 5 clients. And what a lot of people do is they put so much pressure on themselves, and then they don't have the experience to charge those premium rates. And if they try to, then they disappoint the client who signs up. And then they create a negative word of mouth effect and negative reputation. So as much as it may feel like it kind of sucks at the beginning, that you feel like you're almost like interning, or you're doing some work for free, or you're getting your hands dirty, or you're undercharging. Again, don't do that forever, but there might be a little tiny segment at the beginning for your first 3 to 5 people where you need to do it, because you've got to get the kinks out of that offer. Otherwise, you're providing a bad experience that you're overcharging for. It would be better to build an amazing reputation, and the price to value discrepancy is so significant that people are those raving fans. And then after that, you can gradually raise those prices over time. But I just view an offer as like, it's just this prepackaged solution to someone's problem. But in a way, when you convert someone into that offer, you're making a promise to them that you're going to help them. And so 2 things that will end up pissing off a client is like unfulfilled expectations and miscommunication. So if you charge a lot and you don't have the skills to back it up, they are going to have unfulfilled expectations, and it creates this massive disconnect. There's a miscommunication too, in the way that a lot of people, what they think that they're able to do, or what they think they can do as a coach versus what the client's actually receiving. That just leads to disappointment. And then when people start to kind of resent the fact that they gave you their money as a coach, like that's not a good place to be at all. So until you have that confidence, you build that up, and you know that you can genuinely provide someone with a really good experience. I think it depends on the program. Mm-hmm. So some are not. That's could be a whole conversation for another time.
I know.
But I do think doing that initial step is very important.
Okay.
Now, with that said, are there people who kind of are looking for an artificial permission slip, like from their grandma or their football coach or like their sister or people in their life who are never going to understand why this is important to you? So there are many people who put their goals and dreams on the back burner and then kind of sit around and they think that I actually told this story at our live event last month. And I think many people in their business, this isn't limited to health and fitness professionals, but we're raised in a society where you like need a hall pass or you need a bus note to go to your friend's house, or you got to get the permission slip to go on the field trip. And so many people go through life like that. They're waiting for someone else's stamp of approval to be able to go chase their dreams. And that's not how it works. It's like you're going to do it and you're building the parachute on the way down. And when you land, then everybody else is going to be like, oh my God, that was so amazing. I believed in you the whole time. And really, like when you actually needed the help, people didn't really understand. But you taking action creates not only the proof for yourself, but also the people around you that you're serious about it. Because how many people do they hear all the time that's like, oh, I'm going to quit that job one day, or I'm going to do this thing. And most people that they interact with don't honor that commitment. They don't follow through. And so if you're going to be one of the rare few who do, you have to walk that path, sometimes on your own. And then later, after you've gotten a little bit down the path, as you're looking back, people are then going to provide more support. But there's initially in the journey, and there's other content creators who talk about this, but it's like at first people might root for you and then it gets like very quiet for a while. And then all of a sudden you get to a place where like you really don't need the affirmation anymore, but that's when people give it to you. It's like, as soon as you actually get to a solid place where you feel good about yourself, then people are like, oh my God, you're so great. And I believed about you, believed in you this whole time and all of that. And you're going to shed layers of both yourself and friendships. And there's going to be a lot of changes in that middle. It's kind of this messy middle ground that happens for business owners and people pursuing a passion, whether that's related to content or otherwise. But I don't necessarily think all certifications are bad. I don't think all experiences are bad. You need to do something to get your foot in the door. Like I wouldn't recommend having zero education and then just putting up a sign that's like, I'm going to coach people. That we have too much of that right now. If anything, there's too much of that. However, on the other side, if you're someone who's maybe done like 7 programs and you still have only worked with 2 clients, okay, there's a problem. So part of this is a self-awareness thing. Whoever's listening to this, I don't know you personally. You need to do a little bit of an audit and investigation. Like, am I the person who's done 7 programs and I'm procrastinating because I need a permission slip from someone to do this when I need to really write it myself? Or could I benefit from getting a little more experience and allowing myself to truly sharpen the axe, so to speak, and cultivate expertise so that I'm not going to hurt someone? Because going into something without the knowledge and hurting someone, well, you're never going to make a career out of it because you're jeopardizing your whole future. So be smart, be safe, don't do anything stupid, but don't do 10 programs and then sit around and wonder like, well, I haven't worked with, any clients. You need to get your hands dirty too. Yeah. So live events are great for a number of things. Community and connection, of course, inspiration, motivation, changing your perspective, but understanding that coaching, entrepreneurship, or, if you're a provider listening to this, there's so many aspects of what we do where when we're caring for these other people or you're creating content for your audience, like it can be a lonely road. That path is a difficult one. And so even if you find 3 or 4 like-minded friends, I mean, some of my closest friends to this day are people that I've met at live events. So even if not from a professional and business perspective, looking at like the financial ROI of attending one of these things, you will build friendships that actually last a lifetime. Or at least, for me, I've had some for like a decade now with people that I met at live events when I was just trying to, expose myself to all that was the industry had to offer. Community, connections, friendships, inspiration, I think alternative educational perspectives. And maybe it inspires you to take something that you've learned previously in a book or podcast and apply it differently. So that's super valuable. And the free resources are really more like a kind of gateway opportunity, right? They're not necessarily going to make you an expert to the extent that having someone who can kind of assess your strengths and weaknesses, look for different blind spots, and then being able to give you a proven path, right? The key word there is speed. So when you do a program that someone has designed based on someone who's walked the path that you want to walk, it is going to be faster than going through hundreds of hours of free content, right? Much, much faster. So if you value speed and someone kind of eliminating the roadblocks and obstacles in your path, that's where it makes a lot of sense to work with a mentor. That's not to say that free content isn't valuable. Free content should be a tool in your arsenal to get some initial exposure to, if you like the way that someone teaches things, explains things, you'll resonate with their story. If you resonate with their story and you feel comfortable in their environment, then, do their program, it will go faster than the free content. So an event isn't a replacement for reading good books. Reading good books isn't a replacement for an event. Listening to podcasts isn't a replacement for doing a program. They all serve a very unique purpose in your journey where it's synergistic in a way. And if I had to pick, I think live programs with interaction and events are two of the strongest components.